Hello everybody, welcome on in. Let's talk a little bit about the Rapier. It is my favorite melee weapon in the game right now, and I think it might be one of, if not the best melee weapon in the game for PvP. Now there's definitely a few reasons why I have this opinion, and I might be a little bit biased because I love playing with the Rapier so much, but it is genuinely the fastest weapon in this game. It allows you to have the most control over your combos and has some of the most excellent spacing versus any other weapon in the game. Don't get me wrong, it's not like Rapier is super overpowered compared to the other weapons, but I think if you're willing to put the time into learning to play this weapon, you will find yourself dominating other weapons in melee combat. So, without further ado, let's get right into that guide. We're going to start off by talking about the basics of the Rapier, the light and heavy attacks. The Rapier light attack does not have a lot of range, and the Rapier light attack chain is a pretty funky light attack chain compared to the other weapons. You get a total of 4 separate slashes or stabs with the light attack chain, and the 2 middle attacks of your chain are kind of tied together. Now this is good and bad for the Rapier. If you're just spamming light attack, this chain can feel super lackluster and a little bit clunky to use. However, when you start incorporating the Rapier abilities like evade into your light attack chain, it actually starts to feel a lot more natural and you can apply a lot more pressure than the default light attack chain will allow you to. In short, if you're playing the Rapier correctly in PvP, you're often not going to use the full light attack chain. You're going to definitely opt out to use one single light attack poke, or the first poke into the 2 sweeps so that you can follow it with an evade cancel right away. Now let's talk about the heavy attack. The heavy attack is actually a very useful tool for the Rapier. It allows you to have a lot more lunge distance than your light attacks give. In PvP, the spacing between you and your opponent, especially in melee combat, is incredibly important. The lunge distance makes a massive difference when you're trying to zone a player out from your space. And this is a really big deal in melee combat. You definitely want to be aggressive when you're fighting against an opponent in melee. You want them to respect your damage, and you want them to feel like if they come close to you, they're going to be in trouble. So using that heavy attack to zone them out and make sure that you can at least get the first poke before they engage is a really good strategy. Not to mention, when you start mixing that heavy attack in with the evade to quickly pull out of the heavy attack, you can actually exchange with an opponent and take 0 damage, getting the positive of the exchange most of the time. Offensively, however, the heavy attack does not track as well as some of the other weapons tracking if your opponent's moving away from you. So I find it's a much better kind of defensive tool rather than an offensive tool when you're trying to chase somebody down. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the skills that you use on the Rapier, specifically looking at the Grace Tree. The Blood Tree does have some good offensive abilities, but for the sake of PvP combat, the Grace Tree definitely has the skills that make the Rapier special. So let's start off by talking about Evade, arguably the bread and butter of playing a Rapier. Evade has a lot of different uses for this weapon. It is an offensive skill, it is a defensive skill, and it is a mobility skill. So it pretty much does everything all in one skill. And what makes Evade such a powerful ability? Well, it is the only skill in this game that can cancel any action that your character is currently doing, and then allows you to load up another action right away. Basically, Evade is the reason that Rapier feels so good to animation cancel. And the control and timing that this skill gives you arguably makes the Rapier the fastest weapon in the game. So when should you use Evade? Honestly, as often as possible, because Evade has such a short cooldown, and you're often trying to land that one light attack poke after your evade anyway, you're going to be able to use it a lot throughout the course of a fight. Some of my favorite times to use evade is when I'm going in for a heavy attack on the opponent and then evade back to make sure I get the better of that exchange. Any offensive skill followed by the evade into a light attack is an excellent way to put a ton of burst damage into your opponent. Because of the instant cancel on evade, you can pretty much chain this on the end of any combo that you land on your opponent. And of course, mobility is a massive part of using evade too. The basic combo that I like to use, and one that I would recommend you practice with the Rapier, is a roll dodge into the evade, followed by the second roll dodge, and then you seethe your weapon. The seethe on the weapon, of course, is to cancel the roll dodge so you can maintain that momentum after rolling. You'll then get the speed boost from your evade if you seethe the weapon. Unfortunately, if you weapon swap, you actually lose that speed buff, so that's why the seethe is an important part of that combo. Basically though, this is a really good way for you to move a lot of distance while actively dodging attacks at the same time. Now those are just the 3 big examples of when you want to use evade. In general though, try to use it as often as possible and try to mix it in with as many different combos as you can. The more you play around with evade, the more comfortable you'll get using it, and the more fluid your combos will become, making you a better Rapier player in the long run. Evade is also one of those skills that you can benefit greatly from just practicing using against trash mobs. I know it's not a PvP fight, but practicing the combos against a trash mob will mean that when you take those combos into a PvP situation, they feel a lot more natural to you, and you're not actively thinking about what your fingers need to do. Instead, you're watching what your opponent's doing and then reacting accordingly. And now let's talk about that next ability, Riposte. Riposte is also a fantastic skill for the Rapier. It's essentially a counter stun. If your opponent hits you with a move and you go for the Riposte, you not only counter the move and take 0 damage, but you return with a bit of an AoE stun against them. A fast opponent, however, can dodge your Riposte stun, so you're much more likely to get a successful stun off on the target if they're being aggressive rather than if they're picking and choosing their moments. And this can definitely be beneficial against very aggressive weapons like the Great Axe and the Hatchet. Now, if you land the counter stun with Riposte, your opponent will be briefly stunned for 2 seconds. The next attack that you hit your opponent with will break this stun, however. So you have a few different options on what you want to do here. You can roll behind your opponent and then go for that partially charged heavy attack in order to hit them with the backstab. The downside to this is that if you do roll behind them, you don't have quite enough time to go for that fully charged heavy attack. And if you just hit the Riposte, you can also go for the fully charged heavy attack right in their face. Of course, you can add the evade into light attack combo at the end of it, or even evade into roll away if you want to quickly break distance after landing the heavy attack that followed your Riposte. Something worth mentioning about Riposte is that when you do successfully counter an attack, it gives you a brief 1 second or so of invulnerability. So any other attacks, even ranged attacks coming from behind and stuff like that, will deal 0 damage to you when you hit that Riposte, making this a fantastic counter stun if you are outnumbered and you've got a lot of opponents attacking you. Not only are they going to be very aggressive because they outnumber you, so it'll be a lot easier to land the Riposte, but you're also going to be able to avoid a ton of incoming damage when you use it. Fun fact, you can actually riposte projectiles and magical attacks. You're not going to get the counter stun unless your opponent is right in front of you when you cast it, but it is a nice way to at least absorb that damage if you absolutely need to, and you perhaps don't have the stamina to roll. And finally, let's take a look at the gap closer for Rapier, Flesh. Flesh is an absolutely amazing gap closer for quite a few reasons. Number one, it's just a gap closer, so you can use it to just break a lot of distance from your target or get on top of a target that's trying to run away from you. Now, Flesh also allows you to interrupt the gap close with a light attack, and you can use this at any point during the gap close on Flesh. Basically, this gives the Rapier the ability to force a backstab on an opponent that is within the gap closer range of the Rapier player. This is an absolutely massive deal for PvP. When you're fighting an opponent, stamina is a very important part of your fight. If you drain your stamina bar all the way to 0, you will not be able to block or roll until your stamina regens back up to full. So if you're fighting with a Rapier against an opponent and you notice that their stamina has been drained to 0, you can quickly use Flesh to get behind them and then deliver a lot of really nasty backstab damage, and they won't be able to do very much at all to stop you. On top of it, getting behind an opponent who has something like Sword and Shield allows you to deliver the backstab when they're blocking in the wrong direction too. There is no other weapon in the game that can force a backstab as well as the Rapier can, especially at the distance that Flesh allows you to force this backstab. On top of it, you can cancel Flesh with the evade into a light attack to greatly amplify the damage of your backstab combo. And the biggest backstab combo that you could possibly land on an opponent with this would be the Flesh into the first light attack to break the Flesh, the second light attack afterwards, and then follow that with the evade into the third light attack. This ends up delivering 3 very strong hits within very quick succession of each other. While not as fast as using the first light attack into the evade the second light attack, this one deals insane damage if your opponent has 0 stamina and is unable to escape it. The combination of Flesh and evade gives Rapier the best in and out damage potential out of any melee weapon in the game. Not only can you quickly get on top of your opponent, but then you don't have to commit and can quickly pull out and get to a safe distance. And last but not least, you can just use the Flesh for the gap close as an escape. I mean, mobility is a massive deal in PvP, and the Rapier is already a fairly fast weapon thanks to evade, so throwing the gap close on top makes Rapier one of the fastest and most mobile melee weapons that you can choose. So there you go, guys. Due to popular demand, that is my guide on the Rapier in PvP. I think that I personally still have a lot to learn with this weapon. Again, Rapier has, in my opinion, the highest skill cap out of any of the melee weapons in the game, so I definitely need to go train up and learn a lot more myself. I think as time goes on, we'll see the Rapier meta slowly evolve, and we'll see people really get a good feel for the different combos that Rapier really excels at in PvP. That being said, I hope that this video helped you guys learn a little bit more about learning to combo with the Rapier. And of course, if you have some experience with the Rapier and there are combos that you like to do that I did not cover here, feel free to share them down in the comments section below. If you guys enjoyed and you want to catch some live gameplay from me, you can always check out my Twitch. Give me a follow on Twitter if you want to keep up to date with me, and check out my website, pvpnewworld.com. It's got written guides to all of my builds, as well as a bunch of information on the game too. We just had our very first episode of the top 5 New World battles. If you haven't seen it, I implore you to go check it out. And if you guys want to send in your own clips for the top 5 battles, you can send them to Kristofer at pvpnewworld.com. This show is sponsored by What the Fast. They're a VPN for gamers. They can give you better ping to your favorite games. Free to try for the first month. There is a link down below in the description for you. And then last but not least, a massive thank you and a massive shout out to all of my patrons on Patreon. Thank you guys so much for supporting the show. I've been having such a blast playing New World, and I'm excited to keep making content for you. So thank you, thank you. Thank you everybody for tuning in and watching today. I hope that you guys all enjoyed. I hope that you guys learned a little bit too. And as always, have a great night everybody, and I'll see you next time.